This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Place to Be Nation Pop, welcome back to Traders of the Lost Arks, where we talk old comics. And if this is your first episode, thank you for joining us. Who are we? I should answer that question right off the bat. I am Tim Capel, your host, but I cannot do it alone. We are short one man this episode, I will say. Andy Atherton usually joins us. It's his comics journey. He's been learning comics while we talk some comics, but couldn't be with us for this outing. But I do still have with me, of course, the amazing Scott Shiflett. Scott, how are you doing?
Glad to be here tonight, missing Andy, but what we're diving into, I feel like I finally hit a home run with a pick.
Some might say that because this was your pick, and I'm looking forward to unpacking it. And rounding out the crew, we have Sean Kidd. Sean, what is up, my friend?
How are you, Tim? Yeah, after last episode's, I don't know what we should call it, heated debate.
The great debate.
The great debate. Quite the
power
episode.
Debate, yes.
A little bit of a gap between episodes, and Andy has bailed on us tonight. And no, it's not because of that episode, but yeah, really interesting one to talk about tonight. That I must say up front, Schiff, you picked a pretty good one, so I will give you props up front as we jump into this.
Thank you. Yeah, I had heard a lot of good things about it, but I was unsure because you never know. You could always hear good things, and then you're like, really? This is what it was? But I'll let Tim go ahead and talk about what it is.
Yep.
Yeah, so we are, once again, still in the decade of the 1980s here. A little bit later than our last outing, which was from 1984. This is from 1987, Green Arrow, the Longbow Hunters. This was a prestige format 3-issue series from DC Comics, published from May to July of 1987. No cover dates on this, such is the case usually with these prestige format projects. What does that mean exactly? Well, it means that each issue is going to be oversized, about 48 issues, and no ads. So a lot of story packed into these 3 issues. If you're reading it as more like a monthly periodical, it's more like the equivalent of about 6 issues. Mm-hmm. And we'll get into the pacing as well. The pacing kind of influences, I think, your reading experience in a big way. And I've got some serious thoughts on that. But I want to turn it over to Schiff for your thoughts on why you chose this one, sir.
So I've always been a Green Arrow fan, but it's been like very peripheral. Like I had read him and read of him, like obviously with like big like events. Like I just finished Dark Crisis when I had finished this, and I'm not going to do spoilers on that, but he has like sort of a big role, and it's left open-ended. I also really liked him in the Injustice comics. I'm not sure if you guys read those. The Injustice comics were in the video game universe, but it was set in the 5 years of Superman taking over, and then Injustice 2 is 5 years like after the first game, leading to the second game, and how the war's been going. So he was very cool in that. And also like I watched the first like 2.5 seasons of Arrow, and I really liked it. They kind of lost me in the 3rd season with Ra's al Ghul, if I'm being completely honest. I just felt kind of boring because I really loved season 2 with Slade Wilson. So I was like, I'll check this out and I'd always like wanted to read like a specific one. So I was like, let's do the one that everyone knows. So that's why with the Longbow Hunters.
Yeah, pretty notable kind of event miniseries for this character who I would say, I mean, he's been around since the Silver Age, member of the Justice League off and on. Of course, had that team up with Green Lantern in the late 60s and 70s, the kind of legendary hard traveling heroes with Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams, which
one of my old favorites going back and rereading it. Probably one of the only DC ones I really, that and Batman, I really enjoyed going back and looking at because I love Green Lantern. And I can't believe I'm saying this, Schiff. I love their team up comic book. back in the day.
Yeah, I mean, it has a couple famous Neil Adams covers. Like the one is when
Speedy gets high.
Yeah, Speedy's
High Ward. Speedy is a junkie.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's like the most famous. I can't tell you guys how many times I've bid on a CGC comic of that, trying to get it at a reasonable price. I've been unable to, but it's been yeah.
Well, they have a big, huge, and again, I don't mean to get sidetracked, but they have a big, huge, like, prestige format book. You can get all that stuff in, by the way, if you want to buy that instead.
I was going to say, I think I have that.
I do have it. I have
Absolute
it.
edition?
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah, it's huge. Like, it's jam-packed. It's great. Absolutely
Those
great.
were in the day. It was like an omnibus before omnibuses were really even a thing.
Well put, yes. Yes.
Which, that's a mouthful to say. But yeah, I've read a good bit of that run. And I don't know, it's when this particular character, Oliver Queen, becomes the type of superhero who's sort of associated with social justice and activism. And he was sort of the more liberal response to Hal Jordan's more like square-jawed, perhaps just square in general, more traditional approach to superheroics in the 1970s. I mean, he was set up as an iconoclast, basically, right, where they just play off of each other, and it just made for a good teaming.
Well, what I liked is, my theory always was they had these two heroes with the green names, so let's just throw them together.
Sure, yeah.
And for some reason, it turned into this gold that was just amazing. That's how I thought it was.
Yeah.
But
he does have a 4-issue miniseries prior to this, but really, this 1987 Longbow Hunters is the reintroduction of this character, Green Arrow, for the post-crisis DC universe. So we are in the thick of, you're going to hear this term thrown around a lot, post-crisis. So we're in the thick of, the aftermath now of the Crisis on Infinite Earths, 12-issue maxi series. DC rewrote their entire continuity. That had wrapped up in, I guess, 1986. And now we're just kind of spelling out where everyone landed just in the wake of that with their new origins, new histories. Sometimes we had very drastic revisions to these characters, sometimes more subtle. In this case, we're introduced to an Oliver Queen who he's been around. He has an established history. Like, this is not in any way an origin story, but you can tell, like, this is a different character than where we left him pre-crisis, and it's going to be up to the subsequent creative team, principally Mike Grell here, to flesh out sort of what's changed, what's different in this new DC universe, in terms of, Oliver Queen's origin, his history, his relationships, and we just get kind of glimpses of that in this series, which I appreciate that. I'm glad this is not an origin story. We do get origins for other characters, like, Green Lantern has the Emerald Dawn.
I'm sorry, the what?
The Emerald Dawn.
Okay, I misunderstood.
What did you think?
I will move on.
Please.
The Emerald Dawn. I said, Emerald Dawn. I said Emerald Dawn. I'm sorry.
So that was, the new origin for Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern Corps, basically. Batman gets year one. We have,
by the way, I didn't think that was I did read year one. It wasn't terrible.
Oh yeah, I mean that's a classic.
Yeah.
Superman, Man of Steel. Well, more on that later. Wonder Woman under George Perez gets a total revamp, really. And so you get, just different versions of these characters for the 1980s. So then it's basically making them more contemporary, modernizing them a bit. Of course, this would all become dated years and decades later, but that was the style of the time. And this is going to actually lead into a new ongoing series, first ever ongoing series for Green Arrow, which Mike Grell will continue to write. And you have to consider the Longbow Hunters, this prestige format experiment, had to be a rousing success, because not only did it successfully reinvent the character, reinterpret the character, was critically acclaimed. This was nominated for an Eisner in 1988, which is a very big deal in comics. But it paved the way for this new ongoing series, which itself would last for 80 issues. Which,
and by the way, Tim, I might actually, because I did not know any of that until after I read it. Yeah. This book might get me to go back and actually read that.
And it looks rock solid too. I want to say Mike Grell writes all 80 issues of that.
Yeah, so I might actually go read that. So, spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good stuff. All right, so before we get into it here, we're going to talk about what else. We're going to situate ourselves here in time, here in this place in time in 1987, talk about what else was being published around the horn in the industry. So, again,
one of my favorite parts of this pod.
I know. It's one of the more time-consuming parts because I swear every time I do this, it's like, oh, yeah, that. Oh, yeah. Oh, yep, got to talk about that.
I always wonder, Schiff, how do you feel about this part? Because normally this is kind of like outside of where you're from. Like, I'm always curious how you feel about this.
I enjoy it because it shines a light on what else was coming out. And if, like, you know, obviously I wasn't born when this came out, but it's nice to hear if there's any, like, famous arcs that was kicking off or halfway through. So I like it. It's a good, like microscope.
Yeah, and for me, it takes me back to like, oh, yeah, I read this back then. So Tim, I'm sorry. I love it when you do this part. So let's do this.
Awesome. So this is going to be published from May to July of 1987. So I have down first Batman issue 410. This is where Jason Todd becomes Robin for the first time in the post-crisis DCU. So he'd been Robin pre-crisis. Now this is the post-crisis version of that. Not his first appearance by any means, but this is where he becomes Robin for the first time. Spoiler, will not have a long career in this role.
Crow.
Yeah. So we mentioned Batman Year 1. Well, we also have Batman Year 2 firing up. That starts in Detective Comics number 575. Just continuing that story of Batman's revised origin in the new DCU. On the Marvel front, we have Captain America issue 332, which is notable for Steve Rogers giving up the uniform and shield. Yep. So he's wanting to avoid becoming a government stooge. They said, you know, you're using our property. You are our agent. We own you. And he said, fuck all that. You can have it back. So it's that famous cover where it says Captain America No More. And that's going to, I mean, this is kicking off a storyline that's not going to culminate until, 350? So John Walker.
That's U.S. Agent?
Yeah.
U.S. Agent.
Yep. John Walker is going to come in, take over as the official Captain America, while Cap becomes known as simply the Captain and, wears the suit that we would think of being more associated with U.S. Agent. But Cap wore it first. And that's all going back to Cap 332 by Mark Grunwald, who we talked about on our debut episode. Okay, the pulp hero, The Shadow, gets a miniseries from DC. First issue of that shipping in May. So I just remember the Alec Baldwin movie from the 90s. That is The Shadow we're talking about.
I've never seen it. Was that a good movie?
No. It was... did you see The Phantom with Billy Zane?
Honestly, no, because I was never a big fan.
Yo, Affleck threw the bomb in Phantoms.
I've never seen a Phantom. I read
not that one.
Can I tell you my only Phantom experience? I used to watch that Defenders of the Earth cartoon that the Phantom was in.
Yes, Phantom. Yes.
Yeah, but I have not seen the movie. I just watched the cartoon.
Not Phantoms, the Phantom.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. It's kind of the same. I mean, they're both pulp characters, but it's kind of the same thing. Just with Alec Baldwin playing this kind of goofy vigilante. I don't know. I kind of want to watch it again just to see how bad it is.
I know when I think goofy vigilante, I think Alec Baldwin.
Right? Yeah.
Yes.
And he's like, I have the power to cloud men's minds. I was like, all right.
Was that a vagina?
Damn it.
1980s toy property, the Silverhawks. Remember them?
Oh, hell yeah. I
I
watched the cartoon, too, because it was on with Thundercats.
That's right. Yep. Back to back.
Mm-hmm.
So they get a Marvel series.
Was that under Star imprint?
It was oddly enough not. I don't know why.
Interesting.
I think the idea there was like, because G.I. Joe and Transformers were not under Star, maybe they thought we don't put Silver, because Star was really like for the kiddie books, right? Like they were kids comics, and maybe the idea is, while kids are still going to be reading this, we don't want to so much market directly towards that demographic. We want to age it up a little bit, like they did with G.I. Joe and Transformers and ROM and Micronauts and all that stuff.
Yeah, I did read. Now, I think I told you before this started. 87 is kind of a blind spot for me on comics. I will tell you, the G.I. Joe I did read because they had 2 books because they had special missions too. So I was reading both books at the time.
Yep.
So,
yep. That's still going strong. We also have an X Factor issue 19, the debut of Apocalypse's first generation of Horsemen. Will not be the last, but these guys are going to stick around for quite some time. Apocalypse being he had appeared previously, and so this is kind of building him up as the arch enemy of X Factor, which again at this time is the original X-Men.
Mm-hmm.
Thor issue 382 is this is funny. I just wrote this down because it's commemorating the character's 300th anniversary. So why is that happening in Thor 382?
That makes no sense.
Journey into Mystery was the first book that he was in, right?
Yep, you got it. Yep. The Thor's series was originally known as Journey into Mystery. It was an anthology title. It had nothing to do with Thor or Asgardians for its first 82 issues. So
Sif, that's where you make the old joke because I knew that.
Yeah.
No, I just thought that was really impressive. Good job.
Oh, thank you.
So Thor did not come along until some 80-odd issues into this anthology book in, 1961, 62. It was still called Journey into Mystery, but eventually Thor would take over the title. So good stuff there, and that's still Walt Simonson writing. Was not drawing at this point, but still during his run. Okay, this one might be another Sean special here. The Elementals member Fathom gets the spotlight in her titular 3-issue miniseries. This is from the publisher Comico or Comico. I'm never sure how to say that. Now, you may be thinking, what is an elemental? I think I'm just going to maybe say stay tuned for that. I'll just say I've kind of recently rediscovered my love for that series, and I think it's good fodder for this show, maybe.
Okay.
So, yeah, keep an eye on that one. Also on the Comico front, we have, this one's for you, Schiff, Gumby's Summer Fun Special, #1.
Go to hell. I hated Gumby as a kid.
You hated Gumby?
Yeah.
How did you hate Gumby?
It would come on when I was, I guess I was too young to realize how TV Guide worked, and I just wanted Rugrats to be on Nickelodeon.
Yeah. Did you hate Porky and Blue, his little sidekicks?
I don't even remember that. I just remember Gumby's jolly green giant looking ass, and was like, he can go to hell.
Well, I think that one shot is worth checking out. A big one now. Amazing Spider-Man, Annual 21. Now, annuals are normally pretty disposable, but this features the wedding of Peter Parker and Mary Jane, an event that Marvel would prefer you not to remember these days, but it happened. And on the heels of that, we are getting a major, major Spider-Man storyline called Fearful Symmetry. You may know it better as Kraven's Last Hunt.
Amazing story. Amazing.
It really is. And it's also a story that totally does not work if you're reading it with the impression that Peter Parker is not married. Because that's a very, very important component of that storyline and his character at that time. But anyway, that's running through Web of Spider-Man 31, Amazing Spider-Man 293, Spectacular Spider-Man 31, Web of Spider-Man 32, Amazing 294, and Spectacular 132. So 6 issues there. One of the all-time great Spider-Man storylines by one of my favorite writers, J.M. DeMatteis, and the excellent Mike Zeck on art. Going back to DC now, we've got, heavy hitter here. Sean, your favorite, Man of Steel #1. That's John Byrne's reinvention of Superman.
I heard that's pretty good run.
Have you?
I heard. Is it not good? You would know better than anybody. So
honestly, I think John Byrne is a shit writer.
Okay, good, because I hated his fucking Fantastic Four. So
yeah, I think he is an absolutely dreadful writer. The art is, very. If you like John Byrne, it's very impressive artistically. But I think post-Crisis Superman doesn't really heat up until Byrne is out of the picture.
Well, I wouldn't know. I don't read it, so
yeah, it's kind of like he can.
I need a good Superman story still, so
I'll hook you up with a good Superman story.
Okay, good. Because Schiff certainly wouldn't. So.
Well, okay.
I gave you one. You didn't like it.
Go on, Tim.
We have Swamp Thing #64. That is the conclusion of Alan Moore's acclaimed run.
Okay, Tim. So I have never read. So I've always wanted to, but I've never read any of the Alan Moore Swamp Thing. Is that good stuff? Have you read it?
I have. I'm trying to think if you would like it. That's not a knock on you or anything.
No, I know. You know what style I like. By the way, I did enjoy the Swamp Thing movie with Adrienne Barbeau.
Yeah, it's not like that. It's also not like its sequel, The Return of Swamp Thing with Heather Locklear.
I enjoy both those movies immensely.
I do too. I think they're amazing. And doo-doo shit and wonderful at the same time.
That is the right way to put it, yes.
The Alan Moore run, I think, is kind of a masterpiece. It's also like super up its own ass, but I also
that's what Alan Moore is.
Yeah, I know. But it's like Watchmen, right? You think, all right, you kind of go in thinking this is not going to be as good as everyone says, and you read it and you're like, God damn it actually is as good as everyone says. That's how I felt the first time I read Watchmen, and that was sort of how I felt when I read his Swamp Thing stuff.
So you're not sure if I like it or not?
I'm not sure if you'd like, because I like that like weird Southern Gothic, like.
All right, did you like
supernatural?
Watchmen?
I loved Watchmen.
Did you like the movie Watchmen?
I didn't. I thought it missed the mark in a lot of ways. Like,
I did not like the movie, and I didn't watch the TV series, so I haven't read the comic either. So I've always worried about.
Oh, you haven't? Oh God, you haven't read Watchmen?
I have not, because I watched the movie and I hated it.
I wouldn't judge it on that.
I wouldn't.
Because it's made by Zack Snyder, and he sucked.
Yeah,
all right.
All
right. So you think I would like Watchmen?
I would be kind of surprised if you don't like Watchmen.
All right. Okay. Noted. Okay.
I will say, going back to Alan Moore Swamp Thing run, there's a tie-in when I read the Crisis on Infinite Earths event with the Watchmen, with it's a very good like solo story, and it's like damn, and it talks about the darkness, and then that was like the bad guy in Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths, and it was a nice little tie-in. Yeah,
there's a lot of like DC mythology stuff that's tied into Swamp Thing, which sort of wasn't a big deal at the time, but has become a much bigger deal over the years. And I don't know. I just really dig that kind of thing. So yeah, I don't even know how to describe it really, but I would say do not get the most recent collected edition of that because they recolored it, and I don't know why they did that because it really makes for a completely different presentation. I don't know why they didn't just use the original like color palette and just make it more new and shiny looking. I mean, they completely recolored it in a way that essentially changes the art for that entire run. So maybe hold out on getting a collected edition of that, or maybe get an older one if you are going to read it, because I don't think it makes for the same experience at all.
Or read
anyway,
Infinite.
Or read the individual issues on DC Infinite, if I assume they're there. But again, speaking of Watchmen, Alan Moore, we have Watchmen wrapping up with issue 12. So that was being published at this time. On a completely different track now, we've got Mr. Miracle. He's getting cucked because Big Barda and Superman are making a porno together in Action Comics number 593.
Wait, for real?
Yes.
I know they do some like weird things with Mr. Miracle. I read like the reboot recently and I was like so confused.
I mean, I don't love all that Fourth World stuff. I mean, I think Darkseid is a great character. I sort of like Orion, but the rest of them are like, I don't know. Unless you're Jack Kirby, I'm not really fucking with it, and I'm not even fucking with it that much. Yeah, I'm not even fucking with it that much when it is Jack Kirby. So, but yeah, it's a weird issue. It's more John Byrne stuff with this. I'm not even going to elaborate. I'll just titillate you by saying, yeah, Big Barda and Superman, they're going to be
talking,
making a porno together, and Mr. Miracle is going to have big feelings about it. You get Dave Sim, his creator-owned Cerebus, hitting issue 100. Know a lot of people. That's got like a big cult following. I've never read a single issue of it.
I haven't either, but you're right. There's a big following for it.
And I know it goes in some weird places. It runs for like 300 issues. Anyway, Post-Crisis Doom Patrol debuting in their own series. That's written by Paul Kupperberg with Steve Lytle on art. Kupperberg is also writing a 4-issue Phantom Rider miniseries with early pencils by Mike Mignola of Hellboy. Easy for me to say. Let's see. We've got the X-Men in a rematch against the Marauders. That's, since Mutant Massacre got their asses whipped, this is round 2. And that goes down in Uncanny X-Men issue 220 through 222. You've also got the side plot of Storm tracking down Forge because she wants her fucking powers back, finally.
That son of a bitch.
That son of a bitch. So that is going to do it for the comics landscape of May to July. 3 months here. All of that.
Good stuff.
In 1987. Good Lord.
Hell of a run, though. Into Watchmen, all that other stuff. Damn.
Craven's Last Hunt. Man, a lot of stuff.
God, I'm dropping like...
Yeah, right?
Comics were like $2 back then. I would have been dropping like 100 spots.
Wasn't even $2. They were like 60 cents. 75 cents, $1.
Super cheap.
Super cheap.
I mean, look, the cover price of these issues we're going to be talking about, what? I'm looking at issue 3 here is $2.95 for
it's amazing.
Again, prestige format, 48 issues, no ads. It's unreal what comics cost then and compared to what they cost now. I mean, talk about inflation. But all right, let's get into it. These 3 issues, our creative team. You've got writer-artist Mike Grell. So pretty much doing everything but colors here. Our colorist is, see if I can do this, Julia Lacmont. Not a name I'm familiar with, but she's going to stick around and provide colors for the ongoing Green Arrow series once this 3-issue run is done. So kind of a long working relationship there with Mike Grell. Letterer is Ken Bruzenak. We have someone credited as simply assistant, Lauren Haynes. I'm not sure what that entails, but I guess Mike Grell needed an assistant. Your editor is Mike Gold, and VP executive editor is Dick Giordano. That's kind of DC's equivalent to the editor-in-chief title that Marvel uses.
God, man, I feel a little empty not hearing Jim Shooter.
I know.
God.
We talk so much about Jim Shooter and the ways and means of Jim Shooter.
So,
right?
Tim, hey, before you jump into it, how difficult must it possibly be to be the writer and the artist on a comic book, and then not only this, but then have an 80-issue run monthly? I mean, think about that.
I know. It's crazy how rock solid, consistent. Like, you would think this would be published like bi-monthly, right? I figured, looking at the cover date, I was like, there's no cover dates, but let's see. It was published first issue in May. All right, when was the next issue? Thinking it would be like in July, but it's like, nope, May, June, July. Boom, boom, boom.
That's just
right out.
uncanny to me. And by the way, on his other book, John Sable, same fucking thing. It's like how talented must this guy be? It's crazy. So
so that's those are like the two big ones that Mike Grell is known for is Green Arrow and John Sable, which I have had. I mean, I couldn't even tell you the first thing about John Sable.
So John Sable is almost like
Sable?
like James Bondish. Almost.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking at first when you kept saying John Sable. I was thinking Silver Sable.
Yeah, it's like a James Bondish kind of guy. It's like I read it when it was out, and it's like one of the first true non-Marvel DC comics that I actually got into next to American Flag. So it's just one of those things that I picked up one day and I read it. I'm like, oh, this is pretty good, and it just hooked me, and I read it for a while, and then it dropped off. But the art immediately just grabbed me, and then the story grabbed me. So it's probably why I gravitated to this one a little bit too, because it just reminded me a lot of John Sable, to be honest with you. So
yeah, and I mean, when we say writer artist, so he's not only plotting, scripting, he's penciling. We don't have a separate credited inker, so he's inking himself.
That's insane.
I mean,
just insane.
Or not inking at all. I don't know. Maybe in terms of this working relationship with the colorist, if maybe they're just going right in over pencils. I don't know. But it seems like a crazy amount of work. And I was thinking, like, I know Mike Grell primarily from his Iron Man run in like the early.
Ooh, I don't remember that at all.
Yeah, it was like the early 2000s. We're talking like sort of deep into the hero's return period. So Iron Man was not a great series. I mean, I feel like it's
he was
a great comic.
He was a B-teamer until the movie came out.
Yeah,
That's why they made the movie, because they didn't have the rights to the A-Team, and they had rights to Iron Man, and was like, all right, we'll see what to do. And even with me reading the Marvel book they released 2 years ago, so in 2020 or 2021, they didn't even want to hire Robert Downey Jr. to be Iron Man. Like, they had to fight for it, and
Well, he got paid. He got paid a ridiculously low amount of money to be Iron Man.
That's why Terrence Howard didn't come back for 2, because they bumped everyone else's money up, and he thought he should get his money bumped up, and then he saw that he was replaceable.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Iron Man was still kind of a big deal within Marvel Comics, but nobody ever outside of comics had like ever heard of this character. So
no,
he's definitely a B-teamer in that respect. And I mean, I feel like even as such a long-running character in comics, there's not a lot of Iron Man comics that I think are like great. That would hold up as like, oh, this is a Stone Cold classic, you got to read it. So Mike Grell comes in the early 2000s. We're talking like 2002, 2003. And one of the things he does is actually he has Tony Stark reveal to the world that he is Iron Man. Which is like one of the many times that has happened in the character's history. But it was treated as like, it's going to like stick this time. We promise you guys, like, this is the one. And to be honest, I don't know that they've tried to put that genie back in the bottle since then. So maybe it did stick. But, I don't remember it being great. But I remember thinking, oh, this is pretty enjoyable for what it is. And I'm like, why am I not more familiar with Mike Grell? And I think it's because he spent so much of his career just kind of devoted to this one character, Green Arrow, between this miniseries and the 80 issue ongoing series, that's going to tie up a lot of your time, you know. And he primarily was associated with, you know, DC characters, which I'm more of a Marvel guy, so he's just one of those creators who I didn't cross paths with very much until, again, he entered the Marvel realm. But I have to say, from the jump here, kind of like what I'm seeing. But immediately I'm struck by like how striking this artwork is. This is the type of thing that if you're like a comics fan who you're into collecting original art and you like those, like, you know, those artist editions, like oversized reproductions of, you know, someone's artwork on what, like Jim Lee there's a lot of Jim Lee artist editions, there's a lot of Frank Miller artist edition stuff out there that people will buy this stuff for exorbitant prices just because they are into that kind of artwork, you know. I feel like this is prime for that kind of treatment. If nothing else, just to say, hey, I have this in my house, and look at me, I'm such a cool art snob, right? If I had unlimited disposable income, I would maybe be one of those people. I don't know.
I totally get you on that, because I really enjoyed the art. Actually, it was different. You know, I've actually told you guys, and I believe I've said on this podcast, how I have issues with like art in the 80s, like going back and try to read. I know this was like late 70s, but Claremont's X-Men run.
Sure,
it's wordy. I enjoy it, but also the art looks like trash sometimes.
I'm sorry, what?
I said what I said.
Yeah, I don't think you're right, but go on.
All right.
I mean, I get what you're saying in the sense that
compared to this,
yeah,
right. I mean,
you're right.
Look, I fucking love Dave Cockrum, but he's definitely going to be more, shall we say, workmanlike in terms of
yes.
Hey, I'm on a monthly grind. I'm trying to churn out a book. It's a job.
Yeah, I got Claremont like giving me pages, like this dude's being.
No, I get what you're saying, Chef.
This, like Tim, like you said, like this is some shit you would want to put up like in your like like a living room.
Yeah, like I would take I would like take a cover of this and blow it up and hang it on my fucking wall. That's how great this is. How good this fucking art is. It's amazing.
And it like really
stunning.
It really set the mood for like the griminess in a weird way of the story that was being told,
like
especially
grit, like grit.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. That's the word I was looking for. Especially in book 1, where like I know we'll get to this. We're jumping around, but in book 1, like we're seeing.
No, that's fine. We're not doing a plot synopsis. I mean, we'll get into the plot, but I'm not doing a blow by blow.
Yeah, this in book 1, how we see this person who's killing, you know, prostitutes, and like it really catches like the grit and grime. Thank you for that word, Sean. Of Seattle, which I didn't realize Seattle was a shithole in the 80s.
I didn't know. I never would have thought Seattle grit and grime until I read this either, to be honest.
I was like, damn. But like it really like got in deep with that. And even in book 2, when you see like the person who's killing the prostitutes, like little underground lair, and like how like it's disgusting. You see rats and everything going by, but it's also beautiful, I think, when they're showing the tattoos in book 3, and they were telling the story in the main panels, but on the side panels they were also telling like the background on what was her name?
Shadow.
They were telling the background on Shadow. I thought that was really badass. Like, you know, and the way I was imagining it, because I was reading this on my tablet, was like when you open the book and you're holding it, you know, on the side panels where they were telling her story, main story, and her story again, but it's also all in the main story. I really enjoyed that, and the art was just, you know, the only thing I did have a problem with the art, which I had to text you guys to make sure I was reading the right book, even though it was my book, was when Dinah went from blonde hair to black hair within like a single page, and I was like, did I miss something? But
yeah,
Sean literally called me a moron and said she wears wigs, which.
Honestly, that was kind of like you have to pay really close attention to that, Schiff. By the way, from the art standpoint, I got a joke about this, Tim. The scene with when Ollie he's standing at the window with his old man butt. Let me tell you something. There was quite a bit of detail in that old man ass. As someone that can relate to something like that, I was much appreciative of the detail of that art. That was like good stuff.
He's quite got the flat ass going on.
Yeah, he got quite the flat ass. So he really captures and again, I'm joking about that, but the art for me, and again, I know we're jumping around. The art for me is just stunning. Almost like I don't know how to describe it. It's just I think I use the word haunting. Because
that's a good word. That's a good word.
Like it's like I can't take my eyes off the artwork, almost to the point of where it distracted me from reading it because I was so enthralled with what I was seeing in front of me from an art standpoint. And I hope that makes sense what I just said.
Well, yeah, and I mean as brilliant as the renderings are, it's the colors that really pop in this.
It just pops. Yeah.
I mean this you will not find coloring in any North American comic book, certainly in 1987, like this. It is so distinctive. When you look at those, just like the rainy streets of Seattle, it's like you've got a pretty wide color palette going on, but it's almost like everything is viewed like it's almost as if you're in a moving vehicle and you're looking at everything through kind of rain-soaked windows, right? Mm-hmm. That's sort of the impression that it leaves me with, just through the strength of these colors. Again, I feel like I'm doing Julia Lachmont a disservice by perhaps not even saying her name correctly, but boy, I wish she had done more throughout this time period, because this is, I mean, beyond impressive.
Tim, even the covers though, like if you look at the covers, book 3, where I mean, book 3's cover is amazing. Like I could totally have that as a poster if I wanted it, because I think it's really, really cool with the mountains, and it's amazing, just really, really good.
Yeah. So in terms of the story itself, like. There's like a very melancholy
multiple
thread. Yeah, there are multiple threads. Yeah, but in terms of like the tone itself, it's very melancholy in the sense that it's like reflecting on the passing of a bygone era, like especially in the form of Oliver Queen, who they make a point of calling our attention to the fact that he is now turning 43. Right, he's entering middle age, he's feeling some kind of way, and I don't know, I feel like I'm always drawn to that in sort of any form of storytelling, because those stories themselves that are so kind of preoccupied with the past and with looking backwards and sort of trying to find your place and your footing in the present, those stories are themselves fated to eventually become relics of the past, right? Like we're talking now about a story from 1987, which, by the way, guys, is 36 years ago. Mm-hmm. And it is itself going, hey, remember the good old days? And it's like, man, this was a long time ago, and people kind of had those same sentiments even back then, and it's crazy to think how much time has passed since then. So I don't know, that kind of got me in my feelings right off the bat a little bit.
Yeah, I like the reflection too. And again, I know we're not going to go line by line, but I like his reflection. Hey, him and Dinah are settling down in Seattle. He talks to her about having kids, and she basically says, "Hey, you're fucking out of your mind." So so really all that reflection stuff, it's really like, hey, here's where I'm at with my life. Here's where I want to go. And Dinah's like, yeah, no, that's not for me right now, or that's not for us.
Right.
Yeah, it sounds like it's, at the start, it seems like never having kids. Which, is that something that changes? Because I thought Speedy was his kid.
No, it was his, his
ward.
His ward. It's like his, it was like his Robin. It's like his Robin.
I thought that changed a couple of times. I know they get the girl that has AIDS. I can't think of her name.
Good God. Yes.
I mean, it's possible that in the years since then that they've done retcons that said, well,
Connor, isn't Connor his real son, Connor Hawk, or no?
I think so. Yeah, the guy who takes over.
Yeah, the guy who takes over. At some point, he does have a real son. That is because in Kevin Smith's run, they do like
Right.
this whole like road trip deal. So yeah, Connor, I believe, is his son. So long term.
Yeah, which all that's going to be years
Yep.
down the line.
Yep.
But at
All
this
that.
point,
Yep.
yeah, Speedy, Roy is not his actual son, but he thinks of him as like a surrogate son, and
a
mentions,
non-factor in this story.
which is a non-factor, other than it kind of informs Oliver's whole state of mind, where he's like kind of getting a little bit depressed about, like, oh, I'm so over the hill, thinking about his own mortality. He's like, Roy even has a kid now, and that kind of makes me a grandfather in some ways. And, it's, again, we're talking like, this is how this character, who is, again, 43 years old, was talking 36 years ago. It's just kind of mind-blowing the way that nothing ever changes in comics, right? Like, this is so, like, definition of that revolving timeline, right? So, but anyway, I think it's really easy to read this as a response to things like Watchmen, right, that we talked about, or The Dark Knight Returns. I want you guys to maybe agree, disagree with that, because I have kind of a different comparison. Certainly, Watchmen is, just now wrapping up. It's hard to think that this is, as Watchmen is coming out, Mike Grell says, while that's midstream, let me do something like that with Green Arrow. Like, maybe it's more in line with Dark Knight Returns.
Well, I did read something that this was more DC had a vision to do something with Green Arrow. Like, his vision was really about, hey, he read Dark Knight, and then he did do something around Green Arrow, kind of wanted to do something in the same context with this hero. So I did read something about that.
That I can see.
Yeah.
But I don't see it as, like, directly comparable, just in the sense that Dark Knight Returns is like a deconstruction.
No,
like,
this
take
is
this
about
character
something
apart.
Yeah. No, but
see how he
similar.
works.
Like a different take, a different kind of like, you know what I mean? That's like a nuanced story. This is the same kind of deal, just very, very, very different. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not. I wouldn't describe this as a deconstruction, which is a very of its time kind of term. But he's not taking this character apart and seeing how he works and putting him back. Like, this to me reads more like, if we're going Frank Miller, then something like Born Again with Daredevil.
It's grassroots, because they take away all the trick areas, all the bullshit. They just make a normal guy with archery skills.
And he even says that, like, he had to get back to basics.
Yep.
Like, he relied too much on the trick arrows, and it's obvious that he has no money, because, spoiler alert, he gets, like, some Iran Contra money at the end, and he's like, oh, I got a raise today, hon.
Talk about the times. Iran Contra, right?
Yeah. Holy shit.
And the other great thing about it is, not once throughout this whole book is he referred to as Green Arrow. So the other thing I read is Mike Grell really went out of his way to take away from the bullshit that they always thought of Green Arrow as the trick arrow guy and all that other stuff, and just make him a normal, everyday kind of hero and grassroots guy. And I think that's what the other thing he did a really, really awesome job of in this book.
Yeah, more and more I keep going back to Born Again. Not to say that.
Great point. Really
Not
good.
to say that Oliver is like kind of a similar character as Daredevil. I don't think that's the case, but they both share that kind of hard-boiled just rawness, where in Born Again you see Daredevil not deliberately getting back to basics, but having everything taken away from him. It's a real break him down to build him back up kind of story. So, I do think character-wise they are a bit similar, just minus, Daredevil's Catholic guilt. They're kind of both very morose, very open, protagonists, especially for these kind of, you think of these superheroes, especially of the 80s, being more macho, kind of alphas leading the pack, and Green Arrow is, Oliver Queen is not that whatsoever, right? Like, if anything, like, they're almost doing like a role reversal between he and Dinah, where I don't want to make too fine a point of it, but in the modern parlance, like reading Oliver in this story, he's kind of a beta male soy boy, right? Like
Oh
he's
God.
he's all, "Ooh, marry me. Ooh, have kids with me. Ooh, why do you have to? Where are
Ooh,
you gonna leave?"
Shadow whoop my ass.
You know, like he's so sensitive and needy and mopey and like talk about vulnerable. He's practically a gaping wound, right? He
I
throws
think
himself a
I think
acts
pity
old.
party when she
He lets his
leaves.
his oldness gets to him almost.
Yeah,
well,
Yeah.
I
yeah.
took it as he was in a new city and he seemed like he's lost everything, so he doesn't really know what to do with his life now. And like he's sort of on the hunt for this killer of the prostitutes, but then that goes awry when Diana starts going after the drug dealers because like the first off, the start of the book gets real creepy with like this like person high on like crack busts through their
Oh
window,
yeah, bust through there.
and
Yeah.
it's like okay, um, never done crack, but I don't think it makes you want to bust through windows, but felt real 80s school after school
She had a
special
bad batch.
start. Yeah, exactly. It should have been like them turning it in, but yeah, it was. It felt
And
like
that,
he just didn't. They
that
had to
shit
start
happened
somewhere.
weekly on Miami Vice, Scott.
Well, again, of its time.
Yeah, some of it's time.
I mean, as much as I kind of joke about how like simpy he is, I mean, I don't know how else to put it. Like Oliver does feel like in this story, even without having read a whole lot of this character, he does feel through his age and his thoughts,
does. Yeah.
like the sum of his own experiences. Where he went from this like he tells the story kind of an abbreviated origin, right? Where he was this sort of um, privileged, self-pitying guy who became Tom Hanks in Castaway, apparently.
Just like the TV show.
Yeah, he's like this humbled survivor, right? Who goes from that to a media sensation and reluctant vigilante and eventually a happy-go-lucky superhero who's patterning his whole gimmick after Robin Hood because he has like a Errol Flynn fixation, and then eventually he's like, as we talked about, the long-haired liberal iconoclast to Hal Jordan in the 70s after they go on their little run. And now, what are we left with in the 80s? Well, what happened to those types of dudes? They're the burned out hippies, right? And they don't have any real sense of direction. And that's kind of where we're pulling up with him at this point in his life. So it reads kind of true to someone who has been through all of that, right? So I'm kind of like liking that we're picking up this story and just running with this is the character, right? We're not wasting our time with a whole lot of backstory. We're, Grell is kind of drip feeding it throughout points in this story, but we're not spending a whole lot of time on how we got to this point. And I think the story is much better for that.
Agreed.
Definitely.
In terms of the story itself, we're gonna get a lot of tropes here, Sean. Right? Like this is 1987.
Mm-hmm.
It almost feels like checking a box sometimes in terms of all of like the 80s neo-noir crime elements that you have to hit. You've got drug addiction, right? Principally the crack epidemic. You've got criticism of American involvement in two international war, three if we're counting, I guess, the Nicaraguan revolution.
Contra.
Yeah, because you got the broken Vietnam vets. You've got American internment camps and World War II. It's like, wow, we're really playing the hits.
You even got old men making racist terms in contrast to that.
Ooh,
Especially
that was
in the last few pages, that one guy.
You got racial slurs.
Slurs, yeah. Every trope.
You've got the political intrigue, of course. It's just all of these very, very 80s.
You have, I don't know how tropey this is, but I do find this as a thing and something. You had the women. You had the woman. The woman. By the way, Black Canary takes quite the ass whooping in this.
She sure does. Yeah.
She is tortured. And of course, you have the stereotypical man as the hero. By the way, in that scene, that's where I feel like you really see Oliver come out of his shell a little bit in terms of being the Mississippi Man, because he just takes motherfuckers out.
Yeah, that's where it kind of flips, right?
Yeah.
Where he has to now be the rescuer. I don't know that I like that they
flip the switch that quick, because that was very out of fair kind of deal where, hey, we're going to put her in danger and then we're going to flip the switch and make him this badass. And then, by the way, Shadow in the end is going to come in and take out this guy at the same, like that really kind of threw me off a little bit, to be honest.
Yeah, because she's just killing everybody left and right. Shadow, like she is essentially unstoppable. And
by the way, her story is really cool. By the way, I do like how they set her story up a lot. But yeah, a lot of tropes that, again, for the time the story's written, I'm not going to say it's necessary, but it didn't take away from the book for me based on growing up in that time frame. For me, it made sense, to be honest. So,
sure, yeah. And I mean, it is, at the end of the day, a Green Arrow story, not a Green Arrow and Black Canary story. She is a supporting character, but I will say that her treatment is something that would be criticized with good reason. Much. I mean, I'm sure it was criticized at the time, but later on, this will become much more of a talk.
Now, it is. I mean, the art in that and the visual of that and the torture scene is not. It's not pretty. I mean, we should
mention. So again, prestige format, mini, not code approved. No comics code involved here. So you're seeing some pretty violent content
and nudity. You get nudity.
Yeah, there's some nudity. See
a bunch of
tasteful nudity, right?
It's tasteful. I mean, yeah, you get old man ass. I mean,
you get old man ass,
side boob,
saggy balls,
side boob.
Oh, side boob. Yeah,
gross.
Well, you just see the silhouette of his balls as he's getting out of the tub at one point.
Hey, now don't knock it until you've been there.
Shadow balls.
Shadow balls.
Not to be confused with character shit. But yeah, I mean, in some ways it's like, look, I'm glad they didn't kill her. It was kind of venturing in the realm.
Fucked her up bad.
Yeah, it was. Bad. I don't know that as it's presented, we're led to believe like she was sexually assaulted, but it was kind of heading in that direction.
Her clothes were like, I mean, there wasn't left to the imagination there, dude.
Yeah, the way the guy was like, talking.
The guy was like, I'll leave you a piece if you want. And he was like, I'm good, you fucking weirdo.
Yeah, super.
So they kind of left you to interpret that she had been,
maybe. Yeah. It's the type of thing you wouldn't do today, probably.
So was that? Okay? So let me ask this question: do we think that was necessary in this book? Was that really needed?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't either.
Honest.
I honestly
don't think it was
needed.
needed.
I don't think it was needed.
I don't either. But it doesn't feel like. I don't think it goes so far as like, oh, they fridged this. Like that's the term that's thrown around a lot today. Like,
oh my god, it's so funny you said that because I read that term and I did not know that until I read that term because of this book. Yeah,
I mean it's definitely used in the way that in the spirit of that term, which is basically, sacrificing a female character in service of building up or adding more dimension to a male protagonist.
They did that a lot in the 80s, by the way.
They did that a whole lot. And it's kind of like, can you never do that? It's like, well, no, but it certainly is very suspect that it happens as much as it does, right?
Yeah.
You don't see it nearly as often the other way around.
I mean, Wonder Woman 84, turned the table on that when she sodomized the guy who took over Steve Rogers.
Oh, my God.
I've kind of put that movie out of my...
Well, now I just reminded you because they
forgot that movie existed until just now.
Well, you said it very rarely happened, but they made up for it in Wonder Woman 84.
I don't know that
no,
up for anything.
No, I was joking. Sorry, go ahead.
So, yeah, like, does it need to happen? Like, no. It feels very like we're doing this because we can, right? Because it does give this story more of an edge to it.
But it did add an element for Shadow because Shadow came in, and that's the other thing is Shadow turning up in these convenient spots where Oliver had to show up also seemed kind of trippy for me because it seemed like they almost forced that issue to make that part. I don't know. Some of this stuff felt forced to me in terms of who Shadow was going after and how much Oliver interacted with those people just because he had to. Because
yeah,
you know?
there are some definite, like if I have criticisms, like there are some definite narrative conveniences just in terms of okay, like the Robin Hood. First,
the random driver she takes out in that one part
happens to be so we already have and this is very convoluted the way it's set up, right? We've got these parallel threads of you've got a serial killer slasher on the streets of Seattle,
a hooker killer,
ladies of the night are being slashed, just kind of openly in the street, and we have no leads on this, and so it's sort of like, okay, is this going to be propelling our plot? Is this going to be our main through line here? And it's like, well, not really. That's more of a distraction because what we're mainly going to be following is this parallel thread of another Seattle killer known as the Robin Hood killer, someone who is offing these influential old men. Essentially, it's like a war on old people. With arrows, they're all being killed with arrows.
Can we make that happen in real life? The war on old people, by the way.
Maybe old drivers and cruise passengers. Would that? And,
sure. Sure.
Airline passengers as well. So we're setting up we've got two killers in Seattle. It's like, all right, are these related in some way? Well, no. It turns out like Oliver follows some leads, tracks down the slasher. That's our broken Vietnam veteran who is like off his rocker. He himself gets sniped by the Robin Hood killer, which we are it's basically presented to us as it was just he was a victim of opportunities. He wasn't specifically targeted by the Robin Hood killer, who is Shadow, but because he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, he gets it. He gets an arrow through the chest, like so many others. And then they do this weird thing where his intended final victim is then killed, I guess, by her pimp, right? And so that murder is still
blamed
attributed.
For it.
It's like, okay, the body count continues, and it's like, it almost makes you think, well, was this really the guy? When really it's like, no, it's just Seattle is such a violent shithole that things like this just happen. It plays into one of the themes of this story, which is, there are no hunters left. They're all just vicious predators, right? Like it sets up this idea of like there's this sort of nobility behind killing in terms of like if you're hunting for food for some necessary reason, that's one thing, but if you're just a predator, like you're killing for the thrill of it, for the sport, to get off, whatever, and it's like it's presenting that as this is the new way of things, and that's so much worse, and that's the reality of, I guess, 1980s Seattle, at least through the lens of Mike Grell. So even though this horrible serial killer has been picked off, we'll never know that because the streets are so red with blood that you could have a copycat killer who, and it's like, it doesn't even matter that this guy is off the street because there's someone just like it who's going to pick up right where he leaves off. And it's like, and that's kind of where we leave that, right? On a very bleak note. It's very cynical. They just leave that out there and we move on. And the actual plot of this kicks in, which is who is the Robin Hood killer, Shadow, and what's the connection between all these old men that she's targeting, and it's that their connections go back to World War II, right? And we get into Japanese internment camps where there was a prisoner with
from the Yakuza with
Yakuza ties,
2 million
gold bullions who he gives up, and now this is Shadow is his daughter, and she's going to avenge her family's mistreatment, right, and shame. So kind of an interesting, cool character motivation there. But again, it's sort of the way that it unfolds is it's almost like purposely obtuse in its storytelling because it wants to be maybe more complex than it really is. Some of the character interactions, some of the conversations that are had, like between the main villain, what's his name? Magnor,
I believe.
Yes, Magnor, and his sort of CIA accomplice, Osborne. They're talking about, we've put so much effort into setting up this deal, and Magnor's like, don't worry about it. The machine works. I've been at the head of it for years. We just have to run it in reverse. And it's like, what are they talking about? Like, isn't this just it's just a drug trade, right? Like, what's so we don't really, correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't get any real insight into what exactly this big score like they were setting up was. It's just that sort of playing out.
It was crack cocaine that they were shipping out.
Yeah, like, which, okay, but it's like, why? I don't know. It's like so, again, needlessly convoluted in the way that it is presented, that you're sort of like, all right, I feel like I'm a few steps behind here, but at the end of the day, that all doesn't matter because they're going to get sniped by Shadow. Like, she is pretty much unstoppable in terms of, as you said, Sean, appearing when the story needs her to and having seemingly unlimited resources, right?
Correct.
She's kind of more of a, I don't want to say more plot device than character, but at least at the end of the day, where we are leaving off with this character, like, it seems like there is more to explore. And I do like that
she does come back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I was kind of reading up on, all right, do we see this character again? And yes, we do. So I like that they leave it open-ended, and I don't know. I am sort of interested enough to maybe,
same,
like you said, tap into that ongoing.
And Tim, she actually is a character on the TV show too.
Really? Hero?
Yeah, she is. Yes. So Schiff, again, I know you tapped out. I watched Arrow from start to finish, and it became redundant after a little while. But Shadow, and actually they do have a bunch of characters called the Longbow Hunters that show up, but they're actually a group of assassins, but they call them the Longbow Hunters. But Shadow does come in as part of that group. So yeah.
Okay.
So
well, I never watched Arrow. I kind of, I don't know.
They take a lot of the narratives. They take a lot of narratives of this from this book, like the whole Castaway part came from this book. Shadow comes from this book, but they twist the narratives around so it's not the same story, but they take some of the characters and put them in there. So,
go ahead, Schiff.
That wasn't me.
Oh, sorry.
You're good.
I do love Ollie kind of flipping the script at the end. Again, we're getting into the Iran-Contra affair.
Oh, right? Yeah, where he took the money, yeah.
I don't know if, younger readers might need a history lesson almost, but he's like, no, I'm gonna be making off with that money, actually.
Go read up on some Oliver North.
He's like, I'm not above that, right? He's again, I guess it's in keeping with his theme of robbing from the rich, right? It's
those hearings were all over my TV back in the 80s, by the way.
It would have
everywhere.
It would have been very this is surprisingly of its time. I would have thought, look, if you want to publish a response to the Iran-Contra affair in comics, by the time it took you to actually put that together, especially as writer-artist, all that shit would have been well over, right?
Yeah.
Like, this would have been like...
This is a quick turnaround on that.
A very quick turnaround. Because that scandal broke, in like late 86?
Yeah,
so,
this is the fact that he drew it and wrote it, and I'm telling you, it's amazing to me. I can't get over how quick all this came out with that comment. So
yeah. And God, what an indictment of the CIA, also, right?
Like, I mean, come on.
That's sort of ballsy, I think, for 1987.
Mike Grell give no shits.
He really, because I feel like you didn't really publicly hear talk of, and the CIA were really like crooked, and there was that big expose in the 90s, right?
You need to read some of the John Sable too. His John Sable stuff's pretty good. So
yeah, well, I'm more and more interested in this creator's work now.
Yeah,
because it's impressive the way he weaves all these threads together. Which again, there are some narrative conveniences. Certainly, I think it's overly complicated in some aspects, but I'm not really left with any unanswered questions that bother me on a plot level in terms of, well, wait a minute, how did this lead to that, right? Like, yeah, there's a lot going on in the margins, but to the extent that it's important to your understanding of what happens here, it's kind of like neither here nor there, right?
No, by far, I think for me as a group, since this is episode number 6, I think this is by far probably one of the better ones that have intrigued me the most. I mean, I would go past Power Pack. Power Pack for me was nostalgia, and I liked it. But for me, as far as a good read, good story, a character who I really have always liked, and the art, holy shit, this has got everything.
Yeah,
for me.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I would say this is like genuinely good.
It's very good.
You could say it's maybe of its time. I don't know that it hits with people who just like.
It hit with Schiff?
I was gonna say, like, Schiff, you're pretty, like, you don't remember the 80s, right? I mean,
no, I wasn't
born in the
the guy likes Power Rangers. I mean, he likes this.
Yeah. I really liked it a lot.
So here's the last comparison I'm gonna draw for you guys. We talked about the story's maybe contemporary influences, and like I said, I landed more on Born Again. We think there's some Dark Knight Returns.
I land a little bit. Listen, I feel. I mean, again, this might be a little bit of a stretch. I land a little bit on Long Halloweenish when it comes to a story like Batman, where it's kind of more horror kind of deal.
So that's where I'm thinking, like, okay, what about things that this story itself influenced, right? Like, it's one thing about to talk about its contemporaries, but I think in a lot of ways this is a precursor to things like you mentioned, The Long Halloween, which, I mean, that's a 12-issue storyline.
But it's kind of similar noir kind of format kind of deal. Storytelling narratives,
Yeah. How about this? You remember the term decompressed storytelling, which was thrown around a lot, again, in that early 2000s period?
Yes.
It was all the rage at the time, right? Where it was like, it just felt like every issue of an ongoing series you picked up was like part X of 6 or even 8. It was a lot of, again, needlessly convoluted plotting. It felt obscure for its own sake. Very long, sort of leisurely exchanges of dialogue, like multiple pages devoted to showcasing the art, cinematic widescreen art in particular, with not very much actually happening, and just a lot more issues than the story would seem to justify. And that was like the worst example, I think, of this kind of storytelling. And this is more like, at its best, this is what you get from that approach, right? Where it's, it doesn't have to be a negative, just a difference in how you're telling your story. It has, at the end of the day, what we're doing is emphasizing character and atmosphere over plot, really. I mean, yes, the plot is there, but, does this need 3 issues of, a prestige format miniseries to unfold. Again, we're talking the equivalent of 6 regular issues of a comic. Is there enough story to fill that? Not really, but do we care? No, because we like spending time with these characters, and we like the way that the story is being told. We love the art, so it kind of manages to justify its own existence and its own indulgences, if you will, in the way that other stuff, like, God, I remember some... Marvel was really bad about this, where it was just like every storyline had to be at least 6 issues, and it was so that you could sell not only the individual issues themselves, but then resell it to people in the form of a trade and give it everything had a very fancy title that made it sound extremely important, even though it wasn't, and not much happened. Like, I mean, for years, that kind of thing went on. I think, Brian Michael Bendis is a writer who was sort of notorious for, and he was better at it than most, admittedly. But, man, there were some bad ones that just, it was like, this is long just for the sake of being long. But another, something else this has more in common with modern comics, you don't see any thought balloons, right, throughout this. It's all narrative captions.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I didn't even realize that. That's a good catch.
That is a good catch.
Yeah, like, I mean, in the 80s, you got thought balloons and everything, right?
They snorted it up, that's why.
They converted it to crack cocaine. So, yeah, I mean, that's something where it's like, this reads much more of a modern comic. It's almost like, I think you could maybe tell people, well, this was actually published in, 1998 or 2000, but it's a period piece, right? Like, it doesn't necessarily have to have been published in 1987. So, I don't know. I think I pretty much summed up my thoughts. They're kind of all over the place with this one, but there's just a lot to unpack, and I got a lot of enjoyment. We finally landed on one that we really seem to all agree in a good way, in a positive direction, here on Traders. How about it?
Yep, I agree. 100% recommend reading this one. Great read.
Yeah, art, please go out of your way and check this out. And yeah, it's awesome.
Like I said, when I read a book and it inspires me to want to read the rest of the run, that means it's good. And I'm definitely going to go back and check out the rest of his run on Green Arrow. Now, will I get to all 80? I don't know, but I'm definitely I'm definitely going to take a look and see where it goes from here. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, if you do want to read this, you can do so on the DC Infinite app.
Yep.
Digitally. They also have, I mean, this has been collected in trade like many times over. If you do want to sample some of that ongoing series, we have an omnibus, my favorite, right? It's called Green Arrow, the Longbow Hunters Saga, Omnibus Volume 1 hardcover. It's going to be collecting these 3 issues plus like the first, oh God, how many of the ongoing? Looks like about 30.
Wow.
20 or 30 some odd issues.
Wow. How much does that baby cost?
Well, I don't know if it's still in print. That's the big question. Retails for $150. You can get it for less if it's still in print.
And I want this. I want this plus the other 80. Give me the whole fucking thing in one book.
Well, there is a second volume. There is a volume 2, which I believe collects the remainder of that series. So
amazing. God, I love those. Yeah. I used to love that shit when I was younger. I know you still love them, but I do everything digital now. I used to love having all those books.
Yep, that will take you through issue 80, and it looks like there's some bonus material. Green Arrow Butcher Question.
Wow.
I don't know what all that is. So yeah. Anyway, anything we didn't cover? Any final thoughts from you, Schiff?
Just a hell of a comic. I really enjoyed it. Like you go in when you pick something like we do for these pods with a little bit of bias on your own. And even by the end of it, if Sean's like, "Oh, you did a great job, Scott," like, it means I did a good job, because I'm already gonna be like, I picked the best comic here. But with like all three of us actually not dunking on it, and Tim's not having to pay a referee for me and Sean wanting to rip each other's throats out like last episode while Andy was caught in the middle. I think that just gives us our highest recommendation so far. And is this episode 4 or 5?
6.
I think we're at
6.
6 now.
Oh, wow, 6.
Yeah,
I think this is the highest one, the best pick so far. I'm not even saying that because I chose it. I'm just saying because like all three of us like different types of comics, and this one hit.
So I will say this: I have always been a Green Arrow fan. Now listen, I hate the whole. My main problem with DC characters is I find them goofy. I think they made them goofy.
Yeah.
I think they treat them as goofy. The whole Green Lantern thing, one of the reasons why I shit on Green Lantern is because I think the name's fucking goofy. It's a lantern and he's green. Fucking stupid. Come up with a better name. I mean, as a hero, he's probably great. The whole reason he's a hero is cool. Okay, we got this ring, we got the lantern. I mean, like the whole lantern, like, is there nothing we could have come up better than lantern, right? So it's stupid for me. So now you have Green Arrow, and I get the whole Robin Hood gimmick, and he's trick arrows. And by the way, Hawkeye does the same thing, right? Except he's not green Hawkeye. He's Hawkeye, which is a cool name. He's purple. But they don't call him Purple Eye or something stupid, right?
Purple Archer.
So that's part of one of my issues is with DC. I feel like they name their characters stupid. And one of the reasons why I like Shazam is because Shazam is kind of a cool name, and he gets a cool name, and then they make a movie where they make him
Captain
shit.
Marvel, Sean.
Well, anyway, that's stupid. Anyway, I like Shazam because, and then they make a movie that's stupid. So anyway, DC just pisses me off for a lot of reasons. However, what I love about this book is Mike Grell goes in, he wipes away the narrative. We don't even hear the term Green Arrow. Now he has to use the Green Arrow name to sell the book, but we don't. It's always Oliver. You hear the term Archer. You don't hear, but it's just a good, solid book. And he takes them back to basics. No trick arrows. The story's great. They introduce Shadow. The Dinah stuff is good because that also, for me, this really kind of pulls out that whole relationship because, these guys have had a relationship for a long time. By the way, I did not know that Dinah was a brunette until I read this book. I always thought she was blonde. Maybe I missed that somewhere. I don't know.
Wigs.
But the wigs. I had no idea they were wigs. I honestly had no clue until now. So this was really, really good stuff. And Schiff, yes, you picked a really, really good book. And part of that is because I have a soft spot for my heart for characters that don't have powers to begin with. I mean, I think it's been pretty obvious when I've said, hey, I love Hawkeye. I love Batman. And so Green Arrow has always fallen into that for me. Daredevil would be another one. Yeah, he has this hearing and whatever, but still, grassroots for him, he is still a street-level hero. And that's what Green Arrow is too, and I love these. And when you get a good story with those kind of characters, I'm going to freaking eat that shit up. So love this book. Great pick. Highly, highly recommend 100%.
Yeah, I'm with you in that the term goofy comes to mind when I think of this particular character, especially the Errol Flynn blatant Robin Hood.
Yes. But he was created so long ago.
Right. And that's the problem. A lot of this shit goes back to the 30s, right? I mean, like, come on.
Like even Superman. I get the name Superman. I'm not shitting on Superman, but
I get it. Yeah.
If he was created in the 80s or 90s, his name would not have been Superman. They would have come up with something like Quasar.
Crackman.
No, it would have been like Quasar. Or he would have been the Sentry. You know what I mean? You know what I'm talking about, Tim. It would have been
yeah, I get it, yeah.
So DC heroes are a victim of the time of when they were created. DC heroes are the victim of the times they were created. That's the reality. That's it.
And you can't just rename them because they're incredibly valuable IP for this company. So
yeah, I shame DC a lot because of that, but at the same time I also realize they're a victim of the times they were created. So shame on me because I do hold that against them a little bit.
Yeah, so, and what's also great about this story is it moves away from some of that Silver Age silliness where he's got, I will say I still don't love the costume. I think that will be improved upon in later years, but this already, like with the hood, is a vast improvement over the I don't even know what they're called, the little macaroni cap that classic Green Arrow wears with his Robin Hood get up. It's so silly. So already we're seeing improvements in that direction, and we're also developing out like a supporting cast. I enjoy Oliver's, like the interaction he has with the like the police commissioner or just the detective who I was reading him like in the voice of Richard Crenna just because he kind of was drawn that way. Like I want to see more of that kind of thing. It just left me wanting more in a good way. And this is just this is genuinely good. Like I thought, you and I, Sean, like we thought the Power Pack stuff was good and we would defend it, right? But
this is better. This blows it out of the water. Yeah, it's not even close. Not even close. Yeah.
And I will defend stuff like Cap Wolf, obviously, but it's like this is genuinely good in ways that stuff like that is just kind of ironically good. Like I get more of an ironic or sentimental enjoyment out of that kind of thing. Whereas this you could actually recommend to somebody with no sense of shame or sarcasm. So yeah, it totally works for me. It's a great, you know what it is? It's an example of something that DC does really well, which is these just prestige format type projects that I don't know why, like DC is so much better at this than Marvel. Like Marvel just kind of confines all of their major groundbreaking character stuff to really their ongoing series, right? Every now and then you'll get like an influential limited series, but they don't do this deluxe oversized presentation very well, Marvel.
No.
Like I know they had their line of graphic novels in the 80s, but other than like God Loves, Man Kills for X-Men, I guess you could say New Mutants, but again, that's just all it is designed to lead into an ongoing series. It's not something that really stands on its own. Everything else within the Marvel graphics novel universe just kind of feels like a glorified fill-in, right?
Yep.
Like there's nothing that's really like, come on, are we getting that excited over Return of the Living Monolith? Like, I know it gets a very, grandiose production, but no one talks about that like it's anything worth reading today. I'm sure it's fine for what it is, but it's just story after story like that, and no one talks about that stuff. It's really like, again, all Marvel has to compete with this sort of thing is God Loves, Man Kills from like, the early 80s, and maybe, I don't know what, like Elektra Assassin, some of that.
Well, not similar. Yeah, but you had the Death of Captain Marvel was a graphic novel.
Okay, I'll put up Death of Captain. Yeah. But again, that comes with so much baggage. Like I wouldn't give that to be like, read this. It's like somebody who's not familiar with Captain Marvel would be like, what?
But to your point, I get it. The prestige stuff that's the other thing, by the way. With this, you didn't have to know history of this guy. You didn't have to know about his Justice League. You didn't have to know any of that bullshit. And I think that's the other reason why, to your point, we really like this book. You had to have zero history on him.
Even though he clearly has a history, it's all there.
But you don't need to know it to enjoy the read. You don't need to know any of it. It's great.
Yep.
So
this is a hit. Recommended. I can't believe it. We're all in agreement here.
Mark it down.
Positivity.
Maybe we should retire after that. No,
I know. Do we have to hang it up now?
No, I don't think so, because I've enjoyed it. I enjoyed this book. Now I need to keep it going. So, because this is what the pod's about, is finding that one that makes everybody happy. So
that's true. Well, here's the thing. Andy now has to read it. We have to make Andy read it, and if he doesn't like it, then
he's off the pod.
Yeah, he's got to hang it up. If Andy doesn't like this, then he might want to hang it up. I don't know. We'll have to ask him. Let's say, Andy, I need you to read this and let us know. And we don't have to give him any context around it. He just needs to read it.
Right. We shall foist this on him, and we'll get back to you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess that's pretty much going to do it for this episode. Scott Schiff, would you like to tell the folks where else they can find you around the internet. Any other projects you would like to promote? The floor is yours.
Yes. Let me start off. You can catch me here on the pop feed at the Play While You Listen pod, which is my monthly video game pod where I interview a guest and then we go over the release for the new month. When we recorded this episode of comics, it was Summer Game Fest. A lot of cool games announced. Most importantly to me, Spider-Man 2 got a release date of October 20th. Can't wait for that game. It's going to be awesome. Has Miles Morales and looks like we're going to be Venom for a little bit. You can also find me, which is sadly coming to an end, on the North-South feed with 7 Months of Danger. We are, by the time you're hearing this, it should be wrapping up or soon to be wrapping up. We're seeing the Death of the Dangerous Alliance. That is a fun pod. It has myself, Sean Kidd on it, Logan Crossland, Jacob Williams, and Matt Souza. That's been a lot of fun. You can catch me on the wrestling feed on YouTube Roulette. Sean shows up every year just for one, like a neglected father. We're a bunch of neglected kids. That's Matt Souza, Logan Crossland, and Jacob Williams as well. It's like Mystery Science Theater 3000 with us watching wrestling. Half the time I lose my mind halfway through it. It's tons of fun. I think that's it. Sean, I miss anything?
Well, no, I'll bring up that part.
Yes.
You're
Yes.
good.
Yes. All right. Sean, you're up.
Oh, well. Okay. So, so the 7 Months of Danger is ending. As of this recording, we are recording our final 2 episodes this coming Monday. So, 1 year pod. And Tim, the final episode is your favorite match, War Games.
I have such an oversized sense of power to think that the reason you started this entire
it really
limited podcast series is because I sort of lightly shat. Well, I probably more than lightly shat on what many people regard as the greatest match in WCW history and War Games 1992. I do stand by my opinion.
Hey Tim,
even though I have not been on the podcast,
you started a 23 episode 1 year long miniseries that culminates with that.
No one has ever been as drunk on so little power as I am to hear you say that.
It was a lot of fun, though. I mean, we had a ton of fun doing it, and we took the whole entire journey to prove if you were right or wrong. So I do demand that you at least minimal listen to that last episode when it comes.
I will.
How we end up on it. So
yeah, I sure will, because you have done the work. You have put in the work that I kind of didn't. I sort of I read the Cliff's notes going in, in terms of informing my opinion on that match. But
you might be right. See. You might be right. We'll see. So I do ask. So that is coming to an end. And then the other thing is, with that pod coming to an end, I am rebooting NWA Crock and Roll, going back and redoing the Crockett era. We stopped right after Great American Bash '86. Logan Schiff and I have already recorded the first episode, and we picked up August and September of '86, where the big highlight for us, and that is we close out the best of 7 between TA and Nikita, which is amazing. So we cover that. We cover those 2 matches, and we cover a bunch of other matches. What's funny is, and I got to say this, which is interesting, is they had the Great American Bash of '86. Only one title changed hands that whole entire run, and that was for the world title. That was Dusty and Flair. Literally, the next 2 months after that, every single title changes hands, and some of them change hands twice. So I don't get it. So we talk about that on the first episode of the reboot. So listen to that when it comes out on Place to Be Nation. That should be out, I think, sometime in this month it'll be out. So the reboot. So listen to that, please. That's what I got.
No, do listen to that, because it is not often that an abandoned podcast is resumed, because that one's been on the shelf for a minute, right? Like,
we stopped at episode 54 and we're picking up with episode 55. So 9 months,
picking it right back up. That's
9 months. Yep,
that's impressive, and I applaud you for it.
Thank you.
Okay, as for myself, I have some wrestling podcasts as well on our sister network, Place to Be Nation Wrestling. Those being Talking WCW, so more in that same realm as Sean here, but Usually our selections are a little bit later.
It's a fucking fantastic podcast.
Well, thank you. That is with Jennifer Smith and our dear friend Greg Phillips. And we scheduled our next. I think we have at least scheduled our next episode, which is going to be my selection, in fact, on Tully Blanchard. So
oh God!
You'll get
damn it. Fuck.
You'll get some Crockett action up in there.
That's all it's gonna be. It's not like you ever came back to WCW.
Oh my God!
I guess we could do that.
I got wood.
Oh wow! You just went from 6 to midnight hearing about Tully Blanchard. Wow.
I love Tully.
All right. I guess we could do that random Tully versus Funk match from Slamboree, the Slamboree that they did in Philly or whatever.
Oh, oh my God! Wow.
I don't think. Well, we might. I'm not going to sell a short. Other than that, we have PTB NXT, which is it's an NXT retrospective from the network years. We are chronicling from 2014 through, I would say, optimistically, the start of NXT 2.0. That is where I'm going to be hopping off that podcast. I don't know how my fellow co-hosts feel about it, but those would be the aforementioned Jennifer Smith and Jacob Williams. We are pulling up on TakeOver in May of 2015. This is going to have the rematch between Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens for the NXT Championship. Looking forward to that coming your way pretty soon. I do a podcast as well with my friend JT Rosero. Another retrospective, this being on Beverly Hills 90210, classic television series from the 90s. It is on its own dedicated podcast feed. It is called 9021 No-So. So 9021 No-So, you'll find it. Spinoff from the North-South Connection. Good stuff over there if you're into that late night 90s primetime teen drama. Not late night, but anyway. Pretty much it, podcast-wise. You can find me on Twitter. I am at Cyke68, CYKE68 on Twitter. And that's going to do it for us. Until our next episode, we have been the Traders of the Lost Arks. And thank you for listening.